The leather chair squeaked softly as I adjusted my position, taking notes during yet another board meeting. Around the massive mahogany table, 12 men in expensive suits discussed the future of Sullivan Industries as if I were invisible. At the head of the table sat my father, CEO William Sullivan, his silver hair perfectly styled, his custom-made Italian suit immaculate as always. "Miss Sullivan," he called out, not even looking in my direction, "make sure you get all this down. We'll need detailed minutes." "Yes, Mr. Sullivan," I replied professionally, suppressing a smile as I continued typing on my laptop. If only they knew that while I appeared to be taking minutes, I was actually reviewing acquisition reports and market analyses for tomorrow's shareholders meeting. I'm Alexandra Sullivan, though everyone here calls me Miss Sullivan or the secretary. What they don't know is that I own 51% of Sullivan Industries shares, making me the majority owner of this $2.8 billion company. How did the CEO's daughter end up secretly controlling her father's company while pretending to be his secretary? That's a story of ambition, betrayal, and the consequences of underestimating the wrong person. It started 3 years ago when I graduated from Harvard Business School with an MBA and a vision for modernizing Sullivan Industries. Founded by my grandfather, the company had been a leader in industrial manufacturing for decades. But under my father's leadership, it had grown stagnant, clinging to outdated methods and missing opportunities in emerging markets. I came home full of ideas and enthusiasm, ready to help take the company into the future. My father's response, he laughed. "Sweet pea," he said, patting my head like I was still a child. "Business isn't like school. The real world is different. Why don't you start by learning how the company works from the ground up?" That wasn't an unreasonable suggestion on its face. But his idea of learning the business was offering me a job as his secretary. "It's perfect," he explained. "You'll see how everything operates, learn to handle administrative tasks, and maybe in a few years, we can talk about a junior management position." I wanted to argue, to point out that I had graduated top of my class, that I had already completed 3 internships at major corporations, that I understood modern business practices better than half his board. But I saw an opportunity. Sometimes the best way to understand a system is from the inside. "Thank you, Dad," I said meekly. "That's very generous." He looked pleased with himself, probably thinking he had successfully put his overambitious daughter in her place. He had no idea he had just handed me the perfect position to observe everything wrong with his company. From my desk outside his office, I watched. I saw the missed opportunities, the wasteful spending, the resistance to innovation. I witnessed the old boys club in action, making decisions based on golf course friendships rather than business sense. Most importantly, I saw the company's stock price steadily declining as competitors embraced new technologies and markets. My father didn't notice me studying financial reports after hours or spending my lunch breaks analyzing market trends. He didn't realize that his secretary was building relationships with key shareholders, many of whom shared my concerns about the company's direction. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a private conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear, my father and his closest board ally, James Morton, discussed selling their shares to Carlton Global, our biggest competitor. "The offer's good, Bill," Morton said. "We're not getting any younger, and the company's value isn't going up. Maybe it's time to cash out." "But what about Alexandra?" my father asked. "I always thought she'd inherit my shares someday." Morton laughed, a sound that made my blood boil. "Come on, Bill. You've seen her here. Smart girl, but she's not cut out for this business. She's happy being a secretary. The money from this sale would set her up for life. She'd never have to work again." My father sighed. "You're right. She's not ready for this responsibility. Never will be, probably. Better to sell while we can get a good price." That night, I made some calls. The next morning, I emptied my trust fund and leveraged every connection I had made over the past year. 2 weeks later, working through a series of shell companies and investment firms, I began quietly buying shares. My father and the board were so focused on their potential deal with Carlton Global, they didn't notice the steady accumulation of stock by seemingly unrelated entities. By the time they realized someone was making a play for control, it was too late. I gained my 51% majority 1 week before they planned to announce the Carlton Global deal. The timing wasn't accidental. Now, sitting in this board meeting, watching these men who had dismissed me for years, I could hardly contain my anticipation. Tomorrow at the shareholders' meeting, they would learn that their secretary had outmaneuvered them all. And that concludes today's agenda, my father announced, shuffling his papers. Miss Sullivan, please distribute those minutes first thing tomorrow. Of course, Mr. Sullivan, I replied, closing my laptop. Will you need anything else before the shareholders' meeting? He waved his hand dismissively. No, you don't need to attend tomorrow. It's just boring financial business. Why don't you take a day off? I stood up, smoothing my modest skirt. Actually, sir, I think I should be there. As your secretary, to take notes. If you insist, he shrugged. Just try not to fall asleep during all the financial talk. I gathered my things, keeping my face carefully neutral. I'll do my best to stay awake, sir. As I walked back to my desk, I heard Morton's voice from inside the boardroom. That's the problem with giving jobs to Family Bill. They start thinking they belong here. If only they knew how right he was about that last part. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Board members stopped by my desk to drop off reports or request coffee, each treating me with that particular kind of condescension reserved for female support staff. I handled their requests with a smile, knowing it was the last day I would ever have to play this role. At 5:30, my father emerged from his office, briefcase in hand. Don't forget to lock up, sweet pea. And maybe wear something a little more professional tomorrow if you're going to attend the meeting. First impressions matter. I looked down at my purposefully plain outfit, the kind of clothes designed to blend into the background. Yes, sir. I'll keep that in mind. After you left, I stayed late, reviewing everything one final time. The shareholders' meeting would start at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:15, the balance of power at Sullivan Industries would shift dramatically. I called my driver. Yes, the secretary had a driver, though everyone assumed he was just in Uber, and headed home to my penthouse apartment. Another detail my father might have noticed if he had ever bothered to ask where I lived or how I spent my salary. At home, I opened my closet and pushed aside the rack of modest office attire, revealing the real Alexander Sullivan's wardrobe. For tomorrow, I selected a perfectly tailored Channel suit in charcoal gray, paired with Louboutin heels and the diamond earrings my grandmother left me. The ones my father thought I had sold years ago because secretaries don't need family jewels. As I laid out my clothes for the next day, my phone buzzed with a text from James Morton. Bill asked me to remind you. Coffee service for 30 tomorrow morning. Please be early to set up. I smiled, typing back. Of course, Mr. Morton. I'll take care of everything. Setting down my phone, I walked to my home office, a space larger than my father's at the company, and opened my safe. Inside was a thick folder containing tomorrow's presentation, ownership documents, and my new business cards. No more Miss Sullivan, Executive Secretary. Tomorrow's cards read Alexander Sullivan, CEO and majority shareholder. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by my window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my father was probably having dinner with Morton, perhaps discussing their failed deal with Carlton Global, wondering why the buyer had suddenly backed out. Tomorrow, they would understand. Tomorrow, they would learn that the daughter they had underestimated, the secretary they had dismissed, had been quietly building her own empire right under their noses. I raised my glass in a silent toast. Here's to first impressions, Dad. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., knowing it would be my last time entering through the employee's entrance. The security guard gave me his usual friendly nod, unaware that tomorrow he'd be saluting me as the CEO. The conference room was already set up, not with coffee service, but with leather portfolios containing the documents that would reshape Sullivan Industries. I had arranged everything the night before, after everyone had left. Each portfolio contained proof of my majority ownership, a detailed plan for modernizing the company, and the resignation letters I expected my father and certain board members to sign. At 8:45, my father arrived, barely glancing in my direction. Coffee ready? Everything is prepared, Mr. Sullivan, I replied, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. Board members began filtering in, helping themselves to coffee and pastries, nodding absently in my direction. James Morton arrived last, his usual smug smile in place. Miss Sullivan, he called out, be a dear and fetch me some more cream. I'm afraid that will have to wait, Mr. Morton, I said, standing up. The meeting is about to begin. He frowned. The shareholders won't be here for another 10 minutes. Plenty of time for you to. The majority shareholder is already here, I cut him off, moving to the head of the table, my father's usual seat. The room fell silent. My father stared at me, his face reddening. Alexandra, what do you think you're doing? Get back to your place. I opened my portfolio and placed my new business card in front of him. I am in my place, Dad. The place I earned when I acquired 51% of Sullivan Industries shares. The explosion I had anticipated came instantly. Board members jumped to their feet, papers flew, and my father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. This is ridiculous, Morton shouted. Bill, control your daughter. I held up my hand. Before anyone says something they might regret, I suggest you all review the documents in front of you. My ownership is legal and binding. I control the majority of shares through various holding companies, shares that you, Dad, and you, Mr. Morton, were planning to sell to Carlton Global. My father sank into his chair, all color draining from his face. How did I know about the deal? I was in the room when you discussed it. Secretaries are invisible, remember? I smiled, retreating my laptop. How did I acquire the shares? With careful planning, strategic investments, and the business acumen you never believed I possessed. This is impossible, Morton sputtered. The purchase records would have shown a series of separate investments by seemingly unrelated entities. I finished for him. The same kind of complex financial maneuver you dismissed me as too simple to understand when I suggested modernizing our investment strategies last year. I connected my laptop to the presentation screen, bringing up detailed financial projections. Now, shall we discuss the future of Sullivan Industries? For the next hour, I laid out my vision for the company. New manufacturing technologies, expanded market opportunities, strategic partnerships I had already begun developing. With each slide, the resistance in the room shifted to reluctant admiration. These proposals, one board member finally spoke up, they're actually quite sound. Of course they are, I replied. I've spent 3 years studying this company from the inside, learning its strengths and weaknesses. While you saw a secretary taking notes, I was developing solutions to problems you hadn't even recognized yet. My father hadn't spoken since my revelation. He sat there, staring at my business card, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Why? He finally asked. Why go through all this deception? Why not just tell me your ideas? Would you have listened? I turned to face him directly. 3 years ago, I came to you with an MBA from Harvard and ideas for modernizing the company. You made me your secretary. When I tried to contribute in meetings, you told me to stick to taking notes. Even now, you were ready to sell your shares to our biggest competitor rather than consider that your daughter might be capable of leading this company. The truth of my words hung heavy in the room. Some board members had the grace to look embarrassed. What happens now? Morton demanded. You can't seriously expect to run this company. Actually, that's exactly what I expect. I distributed another set of documents. These are restructuring papers. Dad, you have 2 options. You can fight this, waste time and resources on legal battles you'll ultimately lose, or you can accept a position as advisory director, lending your experience to the new direction of Sullivan Industries. I turned to Morton. You, Mr. Morton, have only one option, resignation, effective immediately. Your resistance to innovation and modernization has cost this company millions. That ends today. Morton stood up, his face red with fury. You ungrateful little. Choose your next words carefully. I cut him off. Remember, I'm no longer your secretary. I'm your boss. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Good riddance. My father was still staring at my business card. All this time, he murmured, why we thought you were just a secretary? Just your dutiful daughter? Consider this a lesson, Dad. Never underestimate someone just because they serve you coffee. The meeting concluded with most board members pledging their support to my leadership. Amazing how quickly minds change when power shifts. As people filed out, my father remained seated. The advisory director position, he said quietly, you're really offering that? Yes. Despite everything, you have valuable experience. I'm willing to overlook the past if you're willing to accept that your daughter is now your boss. He nodded slowly, a mix of emotions crossing his face. Shame, pride, and something like respect. I suppose I should clean out my office. No need, I smiled. I'm having a new one prepared. The CEO's office needs updating for the 21st century. Later that evening, after a day of meetings, press releases, and corporate restructuring, I sat in my new office, formerly my father's, looking at the city lights. My assistant, a real one, not a secret CEO, brought in the evening papers. The headlines were everything I'd hoped for. Sullivan Industries announces new CEO. Alexander Sullivan takes control, hidden heiress. How a secretary became CEO, Sullivan's daughter engineers brilliant takeover. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Your grandmother would be proud. She always said you were the smartest Sullivan. I should have listened. I smiled, remembering my grandmother's words before she passed. Alexandra, dear, sometimes you have to let them underestimate you. That's when you can do your best work. The next morning, I arrived at work wearing another power suit, striding through the main entrance as employees scrambled to adjust to the new reality. The security guard did indeed salute. My father was waiting in his new office, smaller, but with a nice view. Good morning, Alexandra. I mean, Ms. Sullivan. Dad will do fine, I said, handing him a stack of reports. I need your insights on these expansion proposals. That is, if you're ready to work for your daughter. He took the reports, a small smile playing at his lips. You know, I always wanted you to take over the company someday. I just never imagined it would happen quite like this. That's because you were looking for a copy of yourself, I replied. Instead, you got someone who learned to play the game her own way. As I walked to my morning executive meeting, my first as the official CEO, I passed my old desk. The nameplate Miss Sullivan, executive secretary, was still there. I picked it up, smiling at the memory of all those hours spent quietly building my empire while everyone looked right through me. I placed the nameplate in my bag. It would look perfect on my office shelf, next to my Harvard MBA and the new Sullivan Industries logo I had designed, a phoenix rising from its own shadows. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's letting them underestimate you until the moment you prove yourself right.